Good evening, everyone. The time is 7 p.m., and we will now get started with our public hearing, tonight's public hearing. I'm going to start off by reading the legal notice as it was published in the local paper. Legal notice of public hearing, Board of Selectmen, Town of Portland, Connecticut. Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on the proposed budget for 2024 to 2025 to be held by the Board of Selectmen pursuant to Section 1201.3 of the Town of Portland Charter at the following place and time: Tuesday, March 12th, 2024, 7 p.m. in the Buck Foreman Community Room, 265 Main Street, Portland, Connecticut, in person and live streamed on Zoom A. Subject: General Government, Board of Education budget, and all special revenue funds. At this hearing, any resident or taxpayer may be heard by concerning the proposed budgets. Copies of the proposed budgets are available for inspection in the town clerk's office, public library, and online at www.portlandct.org, dated this first day of March 2024. Attest Ryan J. Curley for Selectmen. So welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's nice to see a nice turnout at our public hearing. So I do appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you to those who are joining online as well. So with that, if we could open up my presentation. I have a PowerPoint presentation that we can go through. And so while that's getting started, I'll just talk a little bit about the process. So what we'll do is I'm going to talk about some of the highlights of the past year, where we've been, some of the successes of the past year, and where we're going, which will then transition into the proposal, my proposed general town government budget. After that, I will turn the mic over to Dr. Britton, who is here this evening to go over the Board of Education proposed budget as well. And after that, we will then open it up to public comment. So there will be a public comment portion of the meeting as well. So that is the format for tonight's meeting. And then tomorrow, and TBD on tomorrow, I believe we are scheduled to start our budget workshop tomorrow. However, unfortunately, Finance Director Tom Robinson is under the weather right now, so I'm not sure if we're going to do it tomorrow or if we're going to have to reschedule that to next week. So stay tuned on that. But with that, as I mentioned, welcome everyone. So I think to get this started, I'm just going to talk about some of the achievements in the past year. And I normally put a bulleted list up, but I thought going through all of the things that we've accomplished in the past year, I thought some pictures would help. So with that, if you could, yep, go.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
So YouTube continues to broadcast, but we've lost our Zoom meeting.
Okay.
So we need to restart that.
That's okay. I think we can just go with this for now, and then.
So let's,
We're good? All right, great. So a little technical difficulties. Thank you, everyone. So, all right, I guess we'll go to the next slide then. We're going to talk about some of the achievements in the past year. So we could just move on. Oh, you went too far? Oh. Here we go. There's the presentation. So you go to the next slide. All right, and then the next slide. So the first big achievement was the completion of the track replacement at Portland High School. And I do want to thank our state senator, Norm Needleman, as well as our state representative, Christy Carpino, for helping allocate funding from the state for this, as well as I want to thank the Board of Selectmen, as well as the townspeople of Portland for coming out and voting in support at a special town meeting to allocate the funds for this track. As you know, this was a long time coming. The track had been unable to be used for athletic competitions for a few years prior to this. And beginning this year, our track team is ready to go. I see Dr. Britton nodding his head. I believe we have a ribbon cutting coming up in next month as well on this. So thank you to the Board of Education as well, and we look forward to that ribbon cutting, but certainly that was a nice success last year. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. This is our senior center renovation project. This was a project that we received a $725,000 grant, and we completed not just renovating the senior center kitchen, but we also had HVAC improvements and a new generator installed as well, and we were even able to utilize some additional funding for security cameras at the senior center as well. So all of that came together just this past year, and it came out great. So I know our seniors, they just had their first congregate meal not too long ago, so I want to give a shout out to our new senior center director, Sarah, as well, for working on that. But certainly this was another big win for the town and our seniors. So the kitchen looks great. If you haven't seen it, take a look. The generator is very big as well. So with that, we can go to the next slide. And I want to talk a little bit about Brainerd Place. We've seen some substantial progress at Brainerd Place in the past year. This aerial footage of Brainerd Place, this is from May of 2023. It looks a lot different right now. And so just to give you an idea of how far we've come at Brainerd Place in just a short period of time. So obviously, things are in motion over there, but progress is moving along, and we're very proud to get this project going. So next slide, please. Another accomplishment of last year was that we found water. We found water at just north of our Portland Recreational Complex. Thank you to GZA and our Public Works Director, Ryan O'Halpin. We found our test well is supposedly able to yield up to 2 million gallons a day of clean water for the town. Now this water, there's no PFAS, there's no chemicals, there's nothing. This is clean water. It's 330 feet down, and we believe that we've tapped into the ancient riverbed of the Connecticut River, which is pretty neat. And so the next step in this is we have some test wells, but now we actually need to drill the real well. And we're looking for funding, and so the Board of Selectmen and myself, we are exploring funding avenues currently to figure out how we can move on to the next steps. But certainly finding water and finding water on town-owned property is a very big win for the town of Portland. So we can move on to the next slide. We had quite a few sidewalks added in the town of Portland last year. This was through a connectivity grant that was awarded. This was my predecessor received this grant, and we were finally able to get the project going last year. This was a really nice project. We were able to put new sidewalks on Freestone Avenue, High Street, Airline Avenue, Marlborough Street, and Riverside Street, as well as crosswalk enhancements and pedestrian safety features as well. So this was a nice project for the town, and it's great when you see people using these sidewalks and staying safe and off the road. So thank you for that, and we'll move on to the next slide. We had a good amount of infrastructure last year. This is Hilltop Drive, where we had a water main replacement project and road reconstruction project. We also had a road reconstruction project on Freestone Avenue as well. So again, I want to thank our Public Works Director, Ryan O'Halpin. Ryan's been doing a terrific job, and we have plenty more projects that are in the works currently, and there's more to come on that now. But we can move to the next slide. I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for supporting and initiating a town-wide composting program last year. I think this was something, as everyone in the state understands where we are with municipal solid waste and how we currently are shipping so much of it out of state to landfills in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Anytime we can utilize composting here and save on that, not only are we helping the environment, but we're helping ourselves here in town, saving money as well with the transfer station. So again, thank you to the Board of Selectmen for their foresight in approving this. Move on to the next slide. We finally accepted delivery of our new senior center bus for the seniors. This was a purchase made through the American Rescue Plan Act. I want to again thank the Board of Selectmen for allocating and appropriating the funds for this purchase. This was a needed bus for the senior center, and we're really glad that we have it. I had previously ridden the prior bus, and our High Street currently is not great, and going on the old bus down High Street was a little jittery. So with this, our seniors will be able to ride in style, and we look forward to that as well. So that was another win. So we'll go on to the next slide. So that's it for pictures, but there's plenty more to talk about as far as successes last year. The town was awarded an additional $500,000 STEEP grant, Small Town Economic Assistance Program grant, for water line replacement, this time on High Street. And then the plan is for road reconstruction after that. So plans are in the works. Our engineers are drawing up the plans to replace water lines beginning at the high school and moving north down High Street to William Street. And then we're going to, once those water lines are replaced, then we can repave the road and reconstruct the road on top of that. So it's always nice when we can receive a grant to do some of this critical infrastructure work. The town last year was awarded the Climate Leader Designation Award through Sustainable CT. This builds upon the Silver Designation Award that the town had previously received, and it goes to towns that are looking at ways that they can be more environmentally friendly. And certainly I think that's an added bonus in today's day and age. And we have some new solar panels that were added to our Brownstone Intermediate School last year, and we have some more solar panels on the way. I'll get to that in a minute, but that was a nice win for the town. Fire alarms were installed at the Public Works garage for the first time ever, which is I wouldn't say it's funny, because this is a critical need to have fire protection at one of your town-owned facilities in case of an emergency. And I want to thank the Board of Selectmen again for their direction in steering that forward. They were instrumental, and I would routinely get questions at meetings, hey, are those fire alarms up yet? And so we were able to get that done. Again, thank you to Ryan O'Halpin as well. We also replaced the fuel pumps for gas and diesel at the town garage and implemented a new fuel monitoring system. This is really important as well. Our previous fuel system had actually failed, and so this system is totally modernized that, and this was a long time coming as well. I also want to thank and congratulate our town clerk's office. Our town clerk, Michael Tierney, has recently completed a long-term goal of scanning and digitizing all of Portland's land records from 1841 to present. This was a project that began under former town clerk Bernadette Dillon. Bernie did this for years, and then Mary Dickerson continued the project, and I continued the project as I was town clerk, and Michael carried that on and actually finished it. And so that's quite an accomplishment. There's not too many towns in the state that have all of their land records digitized. So I think that's an accomplishment that's worth noting. We can move on to the next slide. So some additional items to know. Airline Trail. We continue to work on the Phase 2 expansion of the Airline Trail. This is important. Our neighbors in East Hampton recently received federal dollars to complete their portion of the Airline Trail, which will finally connect Portland and East Hampton. And Middletown also has a grant to construct their Airline Trail. So really, we're going to be sandwiched between two towns that are going to have airline, their trails completed. So that kind of puts the pressure on us to finish our trail as well. And so we intend to work on that. We've been working with some businesses in the area on MOUs, and we are also working on additional grant funding as well. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to highlight that. We also continue to work on our boat launch project. This is an area off of Airline Avenue that Tilcon had granted the town of Portland an easement to access our town-owned property along the river. And we are currently working with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection to get the necessary permits for this. It's taken a little bit longer than we would like, but we are not giving up on this, and we will continue to work on this. In fact, we have a $300,000 grant from the state of Connecticut to see this project through. So this is exciting work. So that's being funded through grant money as well. I mentioned it before, but last year the town of Portland, well, recently we won the bid, or Green Skies, our contractor, won the bid in order to install a 1 megawatt solar array at our town landfill, at our former town landfill. So this is going to be saving energy for the town of Portland. It's going to be saving approximately, once it's installed next year, $100,000 on our energy bill a year for 20 years. So about $2 million over the next 20 years. So that's another big win for the town. I want to thank Andy Bauer and the Clean Energy Task Force for work on that. And then the Nordic Spa was just recently announced. I want to congratulate Dean Susi and Darlene Rice over at Quarry View for all of their work and foresight in their property and what they turned that property into. And that kind of segues into the town-owned property on 248 Brownstone Avenue and 222 and 230 Brownstone Avenue. You may remember we purchased those properties back in 2019, and we had issued an RFP in 2022 looking for a developer. We were looking for specifically a restaurant at the time. We didn't get any bids at the time. And so DECD, we didn't get any bids, but I should say the remediation hadn't started yet. So now here we are in 2024, the remediation has been completed. We have seen that through. And we also have an additional $500,000 topper grant from DECD to award a winning business who comes with a proposal for development of this site. And given the recent announcement at Quarry View, we think that now is going to be a pretty great time to reissue this RFP for development. So I'm excited to do that in the coming year as well, and more to come on that. So we can move on. So those are some just items to note over the past year. I think those are some of our successes. I think there's more, but yeah, we've been busy. We've been busy, and so now I want to get into the proposed town budget for the current fiscal year, 2024 to 2025. So before we begin, I just want to reiterate the budget adoption process a little bit. So right now, as first selectman, I submitted my budget to the town March 1st. This included the Board of Education's proposed budget as well. The next step after tonight's public hearing is we will have, the Board of Selectmen will meet for budget workshops. The budget workshops are when the board will go over the budget line by line. After that, the board has deliberations where they can make any necessary changes. They can cut, they can add, whatever they feel is necessary. And then the Board of Selectmen will adopt their final budget. They have to do that by April 3rd. Once that's completed, the budget then becomes the Board of Selectmen's adopted budget, which goes to our annual town meeting, and that's held on the first Monday of May. And then on the second Monday of May is our annual town referendum, and that's when the townspeople, property owners, and electors in town are able to come out and vote on the budget. And it's a yes or no, up or down question, and that includes both the general government budget and the Board of Education budget. And that budget referendum date will be May 13th, and the annual town meeting date is May 6th as well. And so all are invited to attend the annual town meeting, and as well, I hope everyone does vote on the budget as well. It's so important to participate in this process, and as I said, thank you all for being here this evening. So with that, we'll move on to the numbers. So here is the General Government Board of Education proposed budget. This is the proposed expenditures for fiscal year 2025. The budget that is currently before us is $40,050,813, which equals a 4.62% increase in expenditures over the previous fiscal year. With that, the general government side is $15,307,292, which comes out to a 3.89% increase in expenditures. And on the Board of Education side, the budget is $24,743,521, which comes to a 5.08% increase. So we'll go to the next slide. Total budget expenditures. I think it's important to show the history of where we've been over the past, this is 5 years of budgets. So what you see before are actual budgets, and you have to remember the 2025 number is a proposed budget. So I would imagine, that my budget has a 4.62% proposal, but that will most likely be changed after the Board of Selectmen deliberations. But the previous ones were final and they were adopted. In 2021, expenditures increased 1.7%. In 2022, expenditures were 2.57% of an increase. 2023, 2.45. 2024, 3.13, and then this year, 4.62. So all in all, the past 5 years is a 14.47 increase, which is a 2.89% average. I do want to point out that I did look up the inflation data over the past 5 years, and inflation is at, in the past 5 years alone, is 19.8% increase over the past 5 years, which does come out to 3.96. So I know these numbers are higher than we would like, but it is significantly less than inflation, and I do think it's worth pointing that out. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So this is a breakdown between the general government side and the Board of Education side. So this is where the previous slide was as a whole. This shows the individual budgets. So you can see that the general government side is up slightly over the previous fiscal year over the past 5 years, a 13.51% increase. And on the Board of Education side, over the past 5 years, they have a 15.45% increase. So all in all, the average over the past 5 years on the general side, general government side, is a 2.7% increase per year, and the Board of Education is a 3.09% increase per year on average over the past 5 years. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. And here we're going to be talking about, the next few slides are going to be talking about the general government expenditures by function. So we can go to the next slide, and I'll go over that. So under the general government side, it's made up of a number of different departments and fields. The general administration budget, now this is made up of the Board of Selectmen's budget, the first selectman, ethics, elections, the assessor's office, the tax collector, town clerk, central services, technology. This increase is 5.34% increase. The bulk of this is actually due to early voting and the costs of early voting. Early voting, you'll see if you look through the budget at the Registrar of Voters and the elections department is up. The cost of poll workers is up 82.91%, which is a very significant increase. And this is because due to the number of hours that early voting is held and the number of poll workers that we have to have working at the polls, it is a significant expense. And the town of Portland, just like every town in the state, did receive $10,500 from the state of Connecticut, a one-time payment for early voting. Our costs alone this year are $40,000. And every town in the state got the same check regardless of how big they were. So Bridgeport got the same amount of money as Portland, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is one of the reasons, or the main reason, for that significant increase of 5.34%. We'll move on to public safety. Public safety is made up of the fire department, fire marshal's office, police, dispatch, emergency management. The police accountability bill certainly still helps to add to our police expenses, that it hasn't gone away. And there's additional costs for cameras, for storage, and all of those things associated with that. But with this budget, I did have, last year I proposed adding a 13th officer to the Portland Police Department. Unfortunately, due to retirements and staffing issues, we were not able to fill that position this year. So I left that position in again for this proposed budget to be funded with a half-year position. So my proposed budget has a 13th officer that would start tentatively January 1, 2025. So we did keep that half-year position in there, and we will look to fill that because given the amount of needs that we have in town, I do feel like we do need that 13th officer. And so we will look to fill that position, should the Board of Selectmen continue to support that position as well. We also have some contractual obligations with our dispatch in Middletown, which was a significant step up this year as well, which played a role in the public safety budget as well of that 4.91%. The Public Works Department, relatively low at 2.32%. So there's not too much there. I'll talk about the planning. The planning department is a 3.66% increase. I just want to point out that that is an increase of $7,000. So it's not a lot of money there. The planning department is very small, but this is mainly to adjust the ZEO, or zoning enforcement officer position. So this is a position that's been unfilled for the past 2 years. And we continually, it's very tough to find ZEOs right now, especially part-time ZEOs, and even larger cities are having difficulties finding full-time employees. So we will, but this is a priority because it's very important for the town, so we're going to continue to work to fund that, and that's where that increase is. And then Health and Human Services of 3.63%. This is made up of our senior center and our medical rides. And there's still a demand for medical rides. That's one of the reasons why we purchased that new bus is for our seniors. And our senior center director will tell us that the municipal agents for the elderly budget continues to be under, we fund it as much as we can, but the needs are there. I mean, and it is tough. I wish we could fund it more, but we have to try to live within our means. So with that, we'll move on to the next budget, or next page. So moving on, the public library has a slight reduction this year. This is mainly due to staffing changes over the past year. There's been a number of retirements which have changed the administration over there. Employee fringe benefits, this is vacation pay, longevity, sick pay, medical insurance, dental, life, and pension. I'm sure the Board of Education will also mention that our health insurance this year was a 9.9% increase, which is never ideal. So both the Board of Ed and the town, face that significant hurdle as well in our budgets. Debt service continues to be reduced, which is always a good thing as we continue to pay off our current obligations. And then transfers into capital. Transfers, including capital. This is transfers into other funds, including our animal control, youth services, building maintenance, resource recovery, parks and recreation, open space, and capital improvements. Now, this year in my budget, something that I am proud of in the current budget is that I have a 79% increase in capital non-recurring funding this year to our capital, which I think is important for the town because we want to take care of, the Long Range Capital Commission meets every year, and they give me a list of what the town needs, and it is always much, much, much longer than we can afford. So I tried to do the best that I could with that this year, and so we'll get to that in a little bit. So with that, we'll talk, the next slide talks about more capital items and the breakdown of that. So as I mentioned, funds from the general fund to fund capital are funded at $516,500. LoSIP, which is state grant funds, that's an additional $130,174 of capital items there. And then the water department is funding $250,000 of capital funds, and our sewer department is funding $380,000 of capital. So all in all, we're looking at $1,276,674 in overall capital, which I think is a healthy number for this current fiscal year. And with that, I'll talk about some of the capital items that are coming from the general fund on the next slide. So we have the building planning departments have a grant match leverage fund of $10,000. Grant matching is important because many of the grants that I speak of that we apply for always typically have a matching component to them. And so I can't tell you the number of times I found an awesome grant, I want to apply for it and let's say it's $1 million, but it's a 20% match. Well, now the town's got to come up with $200,000 to be able to get this money from the state or the federal government. So it's always important to continue to fund that. Also, the planning and building department, 2026 is not too far away. And with that, every 10 years comes our plan of conservation and development. This is very important. It's critical, and every town is mandated by the state to do this every 10 years. But it's also so important to create a new POCD every 10 years. And so the $75,000 that's in the capital item is to hire a consultant to go through this process. And it is an intensive process. So we wanted to make sure that that gets funded now because we got to get to work on that. The fire department has SCBA bottle replacement. This is continually, we have to fund their breathing apparatuses, and we will continue to do so. The fire department also has $13,000 for thermal imaging cameras. I know this is something that is needed, I'm told, for public safety, so we did put that in. Also, an AED replacement for $5,500 is in there for the fire department as well. Ground maintenance has a ride-on mower replacement. This is a big ticket item at $165,000, but this is the mower that I'm told does just about everything in the town. And this is used daily. And it's a critical need. The one that we have has had significant repairs over the years, and it's time. It's been time, from what I understand. And then Ventrac tractor attachments. These are attachments that are able to help trim and do different types of trimming and help the speed of which the grounds crew is able to clear and be able to clear more ground faster. The library, I also propose a $3,000 capital item for AED replacement at the library as well. They did receive a grant for an AED replacement, but apparently the grant wasn't up to the model wasn't up to the current specifications, and we do need a state-of-the-art AED at the library for our employees and visitors. So we'll move on to the next slide. Parks and Recreation, I'm proposing $10,000 to be put into a monument restoration fund. This would be for the Civil War monument on Main Street that you drive by. I've received numerous emails and concerns from residents saying that the town needs to look to, make sure that the monument does not deteriorate. And so we're looking for grant funding. And the grants that we've found for this type of restoration, it's really like a 50-50 grant. So this is 1 year I'd like to put $10,000 away, and ideally we'd get up to $50,000, and maybe we need $100,000 to replace, and if we can get up to $50,000, we can get a grant for $50,000, let's say, and we can restore the monument and make sure that it's around for another 150 years. The next is the police department. My budget does propose adding traffic cameras in town. This is a $48,000 expense. These cameras would be situated on all of the entrances and exits of town. And given some recent developments with some security matters in town, this was highly recommended by the Portland Police Department and also suggested by the Board of Selectmen as well. So I put that in here at their request. I do think it is important in this day and age to be able to have license plate readers that would be able to identify stolen vehicles as they enter and exit the town. Next up is the Department of Public Works and Highway. So we'd like to continue on sidewalk reconstruction. So this is non-grant funds, but it is important to continue our sidewalk reconstruction in town. So I did propose $40,000 for that, as well as HVAC upgrades at our town buildings of $10,000. $92,000 for replacing aged pickups for our highway department, and $21,000 for computers, including backup appliances townwide. So this is for different town computers. All in all, as I mentioned, $516,500. And then the next slide, we'll talk about the capital items that are paid for with state grants. This is LoCIP, Local Capital Improvement Funds, and we have $25,000 for park and field upgrades. We have, again, sidewalk replacement grant of $50,000, $50,174, should say. Continuing to replace carpeting and flooring at our town buildings of $40,000, and masonry improvements of $21,000. And a lot of that carpeting and flooring is badly needed. We just did the town hall, and I think the staff can tell you it was well past time. So all in all, we have, and that's all paid for through state grants, so $130,174. So we'll move on to the next slide, and I just want to talk a little bit about the allocation of funds per $100, per 100 tax dollars. So I think it's important for the townspeople to know, for every $100 that's spent by the town of Portland, well, where does that money go? And so the next slide will show a breakdown of each department. And so you'll look at, I'm not going to go through every year, but we'll look at 2025 and then compare it to the prior year of fiscal year 2024. So administration and finance, that's up slightly from $4.25 to $4.28, so not much of a change. Public safety is up a penny from $6.44 per $100 tax dollars to $6.45. Public works is down slightly from $6.68 to $6.54. The planning department stays the same at 53 cents per $100. Health and human services is down a penny. Library is down from $2.09 to $1.99, so 10 cents there. Fringe benefits is down from $9.23 to $9.08. And risk management is down slightly, 62 cents to 61 cents. So the total general government operating side here is per $100 spent of tax dollars, we spend $30.49 on the general government. So moving on to the next slide, you see the other functions is debt service and transfers. Debt service is down again from $4.16 to $3.84, and then transfers is up from $3.46 to $3.89. Overall, the total general government budgets are down from $38.49 to $38.22, and you see the Board of Education is up slightly from $61.51 to $61.78. We'll move on to revenue. So where does the revenue from the town come from? One of the main sources of revenue comes from the state of Connecticut. This year in fiscal 2025, we anticipate $4,775,020 to be received from the state of Connecticut. This is $211,000 more than the previous fiscal year, and most of this state revenue comes from our education cost sharing, which I'm sure Dr. Britton will talk about in his presentation. So we'll move on to the next slide. Proposed town fees. These are fees for town services that the town receives every year. This is up $210,514 in the current fiscal year. And the increase this year, so all in all, the proposed town fees are $1,560,965. The big increase in our proposed fees this year is due to building permit revenue. So the building department is cooking right now with Brainerd Place and a Nordic Spa and all sorts of stuff, and so we anticipate that to generate more revenue for the town of Portland, which is a good thing. So we look to continue to build off of that, because the more revenue we can bring in on those kind of fees, the less we have to make up for in taxes to the town. And also, we did adjust our police private duty. So police private duty is one of those things that it hits our expense every year on the police side, but it also is a revenue generator for the town. It also brings in revenue. So this year was a good year, we thought, to adjust that and bring it into where it's traditionally been. So you'll see an increase in revenue this year for police private duty, and that is because of the number of projects that we have going on that do require police to be stationed and nearby for traffic control and whatnot. We'll move on to the next slide. Investment income. Portland has been a beneficiary of the increase in interest rates that you see. While it negatively impacts us when we go to bond, say for a school, it does help us for our interest income and investment income. So we have a budgeted $225,000 increase in that revenue this year as well for $450,000 of investment income. We'll move on to proposed taxes for fiscal year 2025. My current budget proposes a 1.03 mill rate increase, which will raise approximately $1,023,849. And this budget does reflect Governor Lamont's mill rate cap of 32.46. So you may recall motor vehicle taxes are capped statewide at 32.46. And so because of that, what that does is it impacts the property taxes even higher, because capping motor vehicle taxes, the town still has to make up for that revenue somewhere else, and that ends up being, you know, real estate, personal property. And so so that is it's a blessing and a curse for those, you know, we have to get the money from somewhere, unfortunately. So we'll move on to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the grand list this year. So our total grand list, the total value of the town's property increased this year. Total value is $954,715,670, which is a $4,339,790 increase, or 0.46% increase over the previous fiscal year. And I do want to thank our tax assessor, Rich Lasky, for his work on that. And we look to continue to grow our grand list. I think it's worth mentioning, it's worth noting that if you look at the top 10 taxpayers in Portland, it's changed quite a bit in just the past couple of years. And the Brainerd Place project is taking over the #1 spot pretty quickly. And I do expect that to continue. So it'll be interesting. We continue to look to grow our grand list in Portland. And so with that, the proposed mill rate is 34.30 this year, which is a 3.11% increase in the mill rate. So your taxes would be increased under this budget 3.11% over the previous fiscal year. Talk a little bit about water and sewer budgets next. The total water budget, now this is funded through fees and charges from the water department. This is not funded from the town side, but the total budget for the water department is $1,780,030, which is a $77,000 increase over the current fiscal year, or 4.54%. I want to note there's no plans to raise water rates this year. We're not touching the water rates. We haven't touched the water rates in quite a few years now. I already know they are high. You don't need to tell me. But we're not doing that. The increase is made up of additional customers and additional users, which is a good thing for the town. And also with this budget, my budget does propose adding and utilizing the additional revenue to fund another half-year position in the water department, because there is a need, and having an additional employee in the water department would allow us to get more done, because right now we only have 2 people in the whole department, and so it's kind of they do a lot. So we'll move on to the sewer budget as well. It's similar to the water budget, where the budget is $1,283,570, which is a $36,645 increase over the previous fiscal year. Again, this 2.94% increase is made up of additional user fees. There's no increase in rates. It's just an anticipated increase in activity. Move on to the next slide. So that's it for my budget presentation. Again, I want to talk about the budget workshops. Right now, we do have a workshop scheduled for tomorrow evening, March 13th, and then next week, March 19th and 20th, and then the deliberations where the Board of Selectmen will be deliberating the budget on March 26th and March 27th. And again, the Board of Selectmen will approve their budget by April 3rd, and then send that budget to a town meeting. Our annual town meeting is on May 6th, and then our annual budget referendum is on May 13th. So those are the dates, and I look forward to seeing you all there. So we can move to the next slide. Again, I'll just say thank you all, and the next slide after that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Britton is here for the Board of Education's proposed budget. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. So for those who are watching, are unable to watch, I know our Zoom is not working, but YouTube stream is working. So if you can join on YouTube. Only problem is if people have questions, would they need to put them in the chat on YouTube? How would they get questions or comments to you?
In the chat.
Okay, so there's a chat feature on YouTube. So when we get to the part, because I'm getting texts when there's public comment, people won't be able to speak through YouTube, but they could post comments in the stream? Got it. Okay, so when we get to the part where there's comments, since Zoom isn't working, if you're hearing me and watching me on YouTube, you'll be able to post your comments in YouTube, and then you can read those out as they come in when we get to that part. So a little housekeeping there. All right, so hello, for those of you who I haven't met from Charles Britton. I'm your superintendent, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight to present the Board of Education budget. So just a little bit of background. The process calls for the superintendent of schools to develop a budget and propose that budget to the Board of Education. The Board of Education then deliberates, makes adjustment to that budget, and votes to adopt the budget, which I'm going to talk a little bit about what those numbers are and that process that we used. So if we can go to the next slide. So first, I just want to mention, all of the arrows in your school district are absolutely pointed in the right direction. I am so very proud of our leadership team, our faculty, staff, a very engaged parent community, and of course, we have the most wonderful students in the entire state of Connecticut. I can promise you that. It is a wonderful school district. I know, as a matter of fact, there's been a little kibitzing on Facebook about whether the superintendent should be required to live in town. Let me tell you, you wouldn't have to twist my arm too hard. I got my eye on some of the efficiency apartments over there. Maybe when my wife and I downsize, if I could ask myself years ago, I would have raised a family here. The only thing that's keeping me from here is that I'm pretty well settled in the town I'm in. But again, you wouldn't have to twist my arm very hard. I would love to raise a family here in this town and send them to your schools. Thank you for everything you do. You provide us wonderful kids every day, and yeah, I would love to live here. I can say that on a lot of different levels. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I'm happy to tell you that the Board of Education this year unanimously approved the budget. The budget request does call for a 5.8% increase, and I recognize, and the Board of Education recognizes, that that is a little bit higher than usual, and I want to spend some time tonight unpacking why. I want to make sure everybody understands why we're a little higher than normal. Certainly it does reflect some of the inflationary pressures that we're experiencing, but there are some other budget drivers that we're contending with. So if we can go to the next slide, please. I'll post this Google slide presentation and the PowerPoint presentation up on the website tomorrow morning so you can see it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time tonight. I could be here for hours, right? Going through in every detail all of the budget requests line by line. I've already done that. If for those of you who are interested, please go to our website. I have the link there, and check the January 9th, 11th, January 23rd and 25th Board of Education meeting minutes. They're long. We spent a lot of time wrestling with this budget. I give the Board of Education a lot of credit. They went through this with a fine-tooth comb and made the right adjustments, I believe. So again, I'm not going to give as comprehensive an overview tonight, but for those of you who are curious as to how the sausage was made, please, it's all of the budget information, the deliberations, the YouTube videos, they're all accessible. One of the things I know I pride myself on, I know Stephanie prides herself on, our business manager, and our Board of Education, is that we're committed to transparency. All of these numbers and the decisions that were made are publicly available. They're on the website right now. Please feel free to take a look. Okay, next slide, please. So what are we wrestling with this year? What are some of those things that have us coming in a little bit higher than usual? We're dealing with some realities, some things in this year's budget that are affecting our requests. First, we have two funding sources that we're using in this year's budget that this is the last year of. We will expect that this year is the end of the COVID relief funding. We've been running on that for 3 years now. We have in this year's budget $247,000 applied to help offset some of our expenses that will expire at the end of this year as that COVID relief funding sunsets. Additionally, for the past 3 years, we've been running on about $350,000 in school improvement grant funding that Gildersleeve received. $200,000 of that has expired this year and will be expired for next year. So whereas last year we had $350,000 in school improvement grant funding, this year we only have $150,000, and next year we're only going to have $150,000. So $200,000 of revenue that we had enjoyed in the past is also sunsetting. Additionally, we're a little surprised, and there's some sticker shock here. I know Ryan mentioned it, that we are experiencing a pretty significant uptick in the health insurance premiums that we have to pay. That is a 9.9% increase. So we have to apply $278,358 more to the budget to meet our contractual obligations for the health care that we provide all of our employees. In addition, this is all of our employee bargaining unit contracts. This is the last year of the contract. We're going to be negotiating either all of them next year, and some of our bargaining units we're reaching out to see if we can do a 1-year extension so that we don't have to negotiate all of them next year. Otherwise, it will be a very busy year. But this year, across all of our bargaining units, we do have contractual wage and step increases totaling $297,078. And then the last budget here, this is the big one, right? This is the one that we had to absorb this year. This is a reflection of our student support service needs. We have students who receive their education in programs and schools outside of Portland, right? These are some of our most handicapped and disabled students for whom we're not able to program in-house for. These are outplacement expenses. And when we encumber those outplacement expenses, we're responsible for the tuition and the transportation that it takes to have those students receive those services. Just by way of contrast, in this year's budget, we budgeted for 17 students. This is how fast things change. So when the budget was passed last year, we accounted for 17 outplacements. Over the summer, a family moved out of town, and we went down to 16 outplacements. Between August and today, we went up to 24 outplacements. These reflect new families who have moved into town and other in-house supports that our teams have worked on. So we're up to 24. So this increase in 691,000 represents that difference between the 17 students that we budgeted for last year and the 24 students that we have to budget for next year. Gives you a little sense of how expensive some of these outplacements are. That's how much it costs to educate an additional 7 students through our student support service program. So if you take all of these together, this was a big hit for us. This was between all of these, both expiring funding and new revenue expectations, and then new expenses. You can see we had to make some adjustments. I mean, if we added all of these up, and did everything the same way we were doing this year, our budget increase would be well over 12%. Now, clearly, I think we all recognize that coming to the town with a 12% increase would be unrealistic. So this is where we started. Next slide, please. We had to offset these expenses with some reductions. And if you watch the Board of Education workshops and my presentations, you'll see how hard these were, right? These are real cuts to our programming and supports, but we had to do them. We understand that accounting for the sunsetting funding and the new expenses, that a 12% increase would not be realistic, so we had to offset those cuts. So I'm telling you, we made some really hard choices. We cut 20% out of all of our budgets from all of our schools. We reduced almost all of our curriculum instruction and technology budget. We did drop 9.6% from special education to account for some of the things that we need, and I'm terrified of this. This is something we have to watch very closely. Cut 4% from our buildings and grounds budget, which, if those of you who know the condition of our buildings know that we're on thin ice there. We're going to be reducing force. We're going to be reducing 6.6 teachers next year. We're reducing 4 paraprofessionals and 1 classified position. These were not easy. And again, I'd encourage you, if you watch the Board of Education and hear the member comments, hear parent comments at Board of Education budgets, hear input from our faculty and staff, these were really hard. They're real cuts. And again, the only way I would frame this budget is there's something for everybody to dislike in it. There's not a lot in this budget for us to like. For those of us who want schools well-resourced with everything kids need, there's a lot to dislike. I think you see them here. For those of us who would prefer a low % increase so that we're not paying our property taxes as high as they would be, you see here that those budget drivers are creating that level of consternation. I guess in my world, I sort of live in, if nobody's happy with your budget, maybe you found the right place, right? And I think that that's where we are. I have to tell you that we've made significant cuts to offset some significant revenue decreases and increases in required services and health insurance. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about what is in the budget. Right, so you can go and watch the recordings and see all the cuts we made and the process we went through to get here. But I think it's important for the community to know what is contained in the budget, and then of course I'm going to use the opportunity to point out some of our successes and headwinds as we head into next year. So next slide, please. So next year, Valley View Elementary School will continue to serve students in pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, and first grade. Here you see the staffing profile that will be at Valley View. These are the people that we need to provide those services to our youngest citizens, right? There is funding to support current academic, extracurricular, and co-curricular programming, and we anticipate that you'll see the class sizes there. I'm going to give you a better look at that. With that staffing profile, next slide, please. This is what we anticipate our class size will be. This is the one area that Portland looks at most closely. I can promise you that if we raise these class sizes, we will have some very disappointed parents, right? And some very disappointed teachers. We're very aware of the research that connects class sizes to student success and makes working conditions for our teachers optimal to promote teaching and learning. So where you see the TBDs, we're clearly still going through the enrollment process. We don't know what our enrollment will be at pre-kindergarten and kindergarten yet. But we do know how many kindergarten students we have this year, 88. We have 6 sections of kindergarten. We're going to reduce to 5 sections, and you see here in the 2024-2025 first grade class size, it is going up a little bit. It's going up an average of between 1 or 2 students next year. Again, that's going to help offset some of the costs because we're going to reduce the kindergarten position. Next slide, please. I do want to take a moment. Valley View is a wonderful place. I just put on here, I asked the building principals to just put some things out there they'd like me to share with the community for successes, and then I'm going to identify some headwinds that we're looking at. We have a lot of work going on at Valley View this year. Kindergarten start age, I'm sure many of you are aware of, is being adjusted so that next year you have to be 5 years old to start kindergarten, or you have to apply for a waiver. We anticipate that that's going to affect class size next year. So we have to keep a close eye on that because obviously class size is going to determine whether we need another teacher. Right? So we're watching that change to legislation and how that's going to affect our enrollment next year at Valley View. We're very excited about some adjustments we're studying to play-based learning. We're going to do our best to get screens out of kids' hands and incorporate a more of a play-based environment at Valley View. We're studying that very closely. And there's a lot new and emerging research on how students learn to read best. So we've engaged this process and are adjusting a lot of our literacy instruction to focus on decoding, phonics, and other components of the science of reading to make sure that our students are reading on grade level by 3rd grade. That's going to be our commitment to the town. Next slide, please. Gildersleeve. Here's our staffing profile at Gildersleeve. Again, these are the people and the resources we need to provide academic support and services to our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade students. Next slide, please. Here again, the most important thing we look at when we ask for resources is how will those resources affect our class sizes. We anticipate what our class sizes will be unless we get new students or students leave, but generally we can look at this year's enrollment and anticipate next year's. And again, here you see a slight increase in the number of students at grade 3, roughly the same at grade 2 and grade 4. But again, as you start to see the section, you'll see where we've identified the areas to reduce our certified faculty. But again, class sizes is something I know that's very important to our teachers, our parents, and our students. Next slide, please. Here again, I just wanted to share some successes and some headwinds faced at Gildersleeve. First, I'm sure you've all heard Gildersleeve was recognized as a school of distinction this year. Huge shout out to the faculty, staff, students, Ryan Wallstrom, all of the hard work to move Gildersleeve from focus school status to school of distinction. This is amazing. This is a reflection of some incredibly hard work that the faculty, staff at Gildersleeve did, and our students working hard. I'm so proud of them. They deserve that recognition, and it's something that is definitely a feather in Portland's cap. Again, some headwinds that Gildersleeve is facing. You know, we do have to keep an eye on this literacy program and how some changes in our student support services are going to be provided. We continue to face some real challenges with staffing. There just aren't a lot of special education teachers and paraprofessionals out there. The market's getting a little bit better, but we have had time filling some very important positions. Hard time. Next slide, please. Brownstone Intermediate School. Again, here's your staffing profile. These are the people that we need next year to provide an education to your 5th and 6th grade students. Next slide, please. And again, here are the class sizes. Once again, I'll point out, 6th grade will be exactly the same, but we are going to see a slight 1 or 2 student increase in grade 5. So we're going to have 5 sections of 5th grade and 5 sections of 6th grade for next year, taught by those teachers and that staffing profile that you saw on the previous page. Next slide, please. And again, some successes and some headwinds faced at Gildersleeve. Again, our student support services we're stretched a little thin there. A lot of that has to do with staffing needs and demands for those services. And sub-coverage continues to very much be a problem at Gildersleeve and the middle school. If anybody is hearing the sound of my voice and you want to come into our schools and sub, give me your name. I'd be happy to have you come on. We could very much use the help. Next slide, please. Portland Middle School. This is the staffing profile, and this is to provide support and services to your 7th and 8th grade students. Here I won't give you the class sizes because we become departmentalized at the middle school, but in general we're going to average 18 to 24, way more closer to the 24 students at the middle school based on our students who are moving up from Brownstone next year. Next slide, please. And again, I just give you some successes and some headwinds faced at the middle school. I'm so proud of the middle school staff. They're doing an excellent job. But again, we do have some challenges staffing, especially in the area of special education. We would definitely benefit from some additional math intervention and support, but again, we had to make some tough decisions within this budget. But I am confident that if this budget is supported in its current form, our students at the middle school and district-wide will continue to receive some outstanding academic, extracurricular, co-curricular, and related services. Next slide, please. And finally, here's our high school. Here's your staffing profile. This reflects the needs for your students in grades 9 through 12. Next slide, please. And again, I'll post this on the website. But we have lots to celebrate and a few headwinds with respect to what we're working on at the high school. Why don't we keep moving? Okay, athletics. There is funding to provide athletics for our students in grades 7 through 12. You see there the coaching positions. We have an assistant principal who is shared between the middle school and high school, who also serves as our director of athletics. And then we have some funding to support current athletic programs. Next slide, please. Outstanding successes across the board. I can't wait to watch the golf team tear it up this year. But all around, our athletic program is incredibly strong. We have lots of very successful teams, and kids have a wonderful experience. Challenges, of course, in staffing. We have not been able to find an athletic trainer. The certification requirements for that position changed, and it's way too expensive to hire our own, and there just aren't enough people out there. Hey, if anybody's looking for a job, become a speech and language pathologist or an athletic trainer. I guarantee you your employment, and you can pretty much choose where you want to work. But certainly that is a headwind faced in our athletic department. Next slide, please. Curriculum instruction and technology. Here's your staffing profile. We have a director, some technicians to support it. Curriculum instruction and technology took a major haircut this year. We had to reduce an awful lot out of this department to make up for some of those sunsetting funds and other drivers. We're going to be okay. We're going to make it work, is all I can say. It's definitely not going to be the most well-resourced department by a long shot next year, but we're going to be okay. Next slide, please. And you see here, this is a tremendous amount of work, all aligned with Board of Education goals. Certainly, those headwinds are something that we're very much aware of. We're working very hard on. They definitely are going to take a lot of time and resources, but we're making great strides. I'm really proud of all of the work that Mr. Martin and the entire tech department has done, and all of the people who support teaching and learning through curriculum and instruction. Next slide, please. Support services. Here are all of the people who provide special education and related supports. I got my fingers crossed as hard as they can be crossed that we can find a speech and language pathologist next year. Right now we are paying, it's an awful lot for as a contracted service. If anybody in Portland knows somebody who is a speech and language pathologist and would like to come to the best school district in the state, get in touch with me. We are actively recruiting, but again, if people are looking for guaranteed employment, I'm telling my daughter right now, become a speech and language pathologist. There are just not enough of them. We're not making them fast enough, but it is a wonderful profession. So I have been optimistic and put this in here as a position. If we already have one, but if we unfortunately are in a position where we can't find a second, that will become a contracted service, and Stephanie will not be in a good mood as we pay those relatively exorbitant prices. Next slide, please. Shout out to Dawn Davis. I hope she's on and listening to me. Dawn announced her retirement this year. She's our director of student support services. She has done some absolutely amazing work for this town over the 7 years that she's been here. These programs on top, this transition program I referenced, ABA, RISE, LEAP, Harbor, Life Skills programs, two things just about those to touch on. If we didn't have these programs, I think that our outplacements would not be 24. I think our outplacements would be closer to 40 or 50. Because these programs are here, we're able to educate so many more students in Portland, which has the benefit of not having to pay the outplacement costs, But more importantly, that's what you want, right? You want students to be educated in the town where they live and not have to go across the bridge to other places. So that Dawn has had the vision and the leadership and the foresight to develop these programs. I think that is going to be her lasting legacy. It's certainly something I hope you all come to her retirement party. You'll hear me remark on. But sometimes while we look to those student support services maybe with maybe a little longer face than we might like, trust me when I tell you that we've done everything we can to limit the number of outplacements by building these specialized support service programs in-house. All the credit in the world to Dawn and her team for creating those, and to our building principals for helping manage those. It has been a tremendous blessing for the town. And of course, the headwinds that you face, you see I mentioned speech and language there. Kid you not, if you know anybody who's a speech and language pathologist, drop my name to them. Otherwise, those are some of the headwinds that we face. Next slide, please. And then we have our facilities department, who does an amazing job with duct tape and glue, keeping these buildings together. If anybody is hearing me that thinks I'm exaggerating in any way, please get in touch with me and let me give you a tour. I would love it if you saw Valley View Sunday morning after all the rain we got Saturday. It's not good. We are in a really tough place facilities-wise. This is not, I'm not exaggerating, I'm not being Chicken Little. I'm trying to be honest with the community here that your 3 elementary schools are on very borrowed time at this point. And if you'd like information to confirm that, you can look online, and I have both the Sightlines report and our Fryer facilities analysis, or I'd be happy to have Bob Shea come up and break it down for you. But we have a lot of work to do on our facilities. This crew that you see here does an amazing job keeping it together. The facilities are clean on the outside, and they're safe for our students, and a lot of that is the work of this group here, who we owe our eternal gratitude to. Next slide, please. So I need to end by having a little conversation about where we are with the modernization plan. You heard me talk a little bit about the very rough shape that Valley View, Gildersleeve, and Brownstone are in, and I'm truly not exaggerating. They're suffering. These are schools that have had almost more than 3 decades without significant capital investments in, and we're on borrowed time. So I think the community is well aware. Thank you, Ryan. I think it was a brilliant idea to do the Great Blue research to both educate the community and get input. I think that was an outstanding and very wise decision to invest in that. And I think that the feedback from the community was very thoughtful. And of course, the Facility Study Committee that worked for 2 years on the report is another group that I think did an amazing job, left no stone unturned. So where are we, right? Right now, the direction that it looks like the town is going is towards the consolidation to 1 pre-K to 5 Valley View Elementary School. To that end, 2 weeks ago or last week, this land use committee met for the first time and has started the process. I know there were tours that committee was on of the facilities this weekend, and that committee has some work to do in terms of helping us develop an understanding of what would happen to a decommissioned Gildersleeve and a decommissioned Brownstone. In addition, I wrote what's called an education specifications plan. It's on the website. You're welcome to take a look at it. That is something that the Board of Education would need to approve in order for us to move this process forward. Right now, that education specifications plan is in the hands of Fryer Architects, right? So we've been working with a gentleman named Mike Serrano and Bryce, and forgive me, I've forgotten Bryce's last name. They are architects for Fryer, reputable, outstanding architecture firm. Today, they provided me some visuals and a blocking diagram of what a pre-K to 5 Valley View would look like. I'm not prepared to share that with everyone yet until the costs are finalized. So Fryer is taking that blocking diagram right now and developing some cost estimates in-house at Fryer, and they're sharing that blocking diagram with Gilbane Construction, who they consult with, to confirm that. So we're going to get cost estimates from Fryer and cost estimates from Gilbane, which hopefully will be the same, but otherwise Gilbane and Fryer can get together and figure out whether they need to meet in the middle or why one was in a different place. So blocking diagrams are here. We'll be prepared to share those, along with the costs, which I know Ryan and Tom and I would need to share with our town financial planner to get a snapshot of an amortization table that considers current interest rates and a bonding table. And then, of course, just on the side note, I have a team of educators led by one of our administrators visiting pre-K to 5 schools in neighboring towns, specifically in Marlborough, South Windsor, Ellington, and Mansfield. Pre-K 5 schools that would be the exact same size as this large pre-K 5 Valley View, with the goal of gathering data from those schools about logistically how do they operate, what are their staffing profiles, how do things work in those schools. The nice thing is here that we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Many towns in the state of Connecticut have pre-K to 5 schools. We should be looking at them and learning from them as we consider schedules and staffing profiles. My goal is that once we have all of these things, which I think will be sometime around April 2nd, I'll be able to pull them together, and I think it would be a very important opportunity for me to share all of that information in one package, right? Not sort of let it drip and drab out, come out in different ways, but pull all of that information together and share it with the whole community to give everybody a good detailed look at what it would take to consolidate schools to one Valley View, how much it would cost, and then all of the questions about how would traffic patterns work, what would pickup look like, how would the school operate so that students still have that small hometown feel. All of the concerns we've heard both from the focus groups and through feedback on the Great Blue Survey. My hope is that we'll have that sometime in April with some decisions to be made over the spring. If out of that process the community comes together and thinks this is a good idea, the steps would need, the Board of Education would need to take action to approve the education specifications plan. The Board of Selectmen would need to take action to potentially send a bonding referendum to the voters in November. And Stephanie and I would have to work very hard this spring to make a June 30th deadline to submit a grant application to the state for the 51% reimbursement, which is our general construction reimbursement that the town would receive from Hartford. So lots of work to do between now and June 30th, but I'm confident that we can get it done. And I am absolutely confident that we need to do this because, trust me when I tell you, Valley View, Gildersleeve, and Brownstone, they're in rough shape. And I think it would be really important for anybody who is unsure if I'm not being Chicken Little and saying that the sky is falling to give me a call and let me give you a tour. I don't think you'd need to walk far into the buildings to start to see some of the deterioration that is quite visible and present in our buildings. And particularly if I could give you that tour after a rainy day when the wind blows from, I think, the southeast at Valley View, it's not such a great picture. So there's lots of hope on the horizon, but I fully understand a lot of it is going to require change and none of it's cheap. And I'm sorry about that, but if there were a cheap and easy way through any of these things, I think we would have found them and I'd be here talking about them. That's all I have.
You can take the slides down. We'll now open it up to public comment. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to comment, please come on up. Just state your name and address, and you can please comment. And just please keep comments to the budget if possible. Thank you. we adjourn, are there any comments online, on YouTube, or? Okay. So we'll go one more time for any public comments. All right. Seeing none, the time is 8:21, and so we will now close this public hearing. Thank you all for coming, and have a good night, everyone. Thank you.